You're in the right place. Dr. Kris Wusterhausen has been in your shoes, and he's done the work and can show you how you can turn things around. In this podcast, he'll share his personal stories and advice on how to create the life you want for yourself as a provider and as a business person. You'll learn how to reclaim your life, your time, your energy, and most of all, reclaim the dream you had when you started your journey to become a doctor. Welcome to the Dr. Kris Podcast. All right, welcome back, Dr. Kris. How are you?
I'm great. How's your week going?
Going well, hustling. You know, I think the things that are appealing on these conversations that you and I have, you know, when we think about the folks that want to improve, they take ownership in their responsibility in their future, in their relationships, in their professions and stuff. And in this relationship, as far as addressing our health, being more, feeling better, you know, we're in an environment that seems like a lot of things are stacked against us. The food, the diets, the medicine, the pharmaceutical influence over medicine. There's just a lot of things stacked against us. And what's exciting about these conversations and providers like you is that you're offering a way to sit and work together, to think about what things we need to change that'll really impact our lives. And these conversations that we've been having, we've been walking along what were those little decisions that made big impacts. Last time we talked about hormones and what it did for your practice, what it did for you personally, and then what it's done for your patients. And today I just thought, let's talk about the next big lifestyle change that we should consider that would go along with that would stack on top of little improvements.
Yeah, and I would expound upon that. I think so many times patients just don't know where to start. They don't have that how do I get started spot. And maybe it's not even going into your doctor to look at your hormones, but what are some things that I can do to just achieve overall better health? And some of these things can be quite simple, but of course, as I would say with my journey and what I do today, they are a little bit different. And it's not that how I started was wrong. I just think there's better ways to kind of do things. And you know, the thing that so hormones, exercise, nutrition, those are the three biggies to kind of start with. And there's supplements and possibly peptides. And then there's obviously other little small things. But I think that the good news is that one of the easiest and best things that we can do for ourselves is intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is something that nearly all patients can do and is free. You know, really and truly, the only patients that can't do intermittent fasting or maybe should hesitate with intermittent fasting are your diabetics. They, especially ones who might be on certain medications, including insulin, that might be a reason to hesitate on intermittent fasting. And of course, all patients should talk to whoever their provider is before starting these things. But the good news is that is not the majority of our patients. The vast majority of our patients are not diabetics, or even if they are diabetic, sometimes you can still pull off intermittent fasting as long as they're not on insulin. And so I always like starting with just what is the definition of intermittent fasting, because so many patients I feel like think they do it, or they just don't have the true knowledge of what intermittent fasting is. And as I always just break it down for my patients, it's a 0 caloric intake for extended periods of time. And the truth is any amount of time that we can fast is good for us. Even if a patient only does 12 hours, 13 hours, that is still positive. But we're really looking for that minimum of 16-hour fasting window if we can. And that generally works very well for a lot of our patients' schedules. especially if you're kind of an 8 to 5 type person. Like I always just try to tell patients what my schedule is. And so when I'm fasting, I allow myself 3 things: water, black coffee, unsweet tea. Well, in my case, 2 things because I don't drink coffee. So water, unsweet tea, and patients can drink black coffee. And as I tell my patients, no, it's literally that. It's not a little bit of creamer in my coffee, or I just put 1 teaspoon of sugar. That will break your fast. And so I always try to just talk my patients into 16 hours continuous minimum of fasting. So for a lot of my patients, they will eat 12 noon to 8 p.m. and they will fast 8 p.m. to 12 noon. It's a very easy schedule to remember. Or if you're like, my lunch is at 11, fine, then 11 to 7, 7 to 11. Very, very easy to remember. And you don't have to do it every day. It could be something that you can do. I do try to talk my patients in a minimum of 5 days a week to fast. So typically that's Monday through Friday, and then off on the weekends if you choose. You could fast on the weekends as well. But what does that do for the body? I think that's, one of those big things. Is like, okay, so if I'm going to go fast, what's going to happen? So the first thing I tell patients is it's very common for the first, if you're not used to fasting at all, this may be not a very fun thing for the first maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 times that you do it, because your body's going to rebel on you a little bit, because our body gets used to our habits and it doesn't like to break our habits. It feels like something is wrong when we try to break these habits. And so it's not uncommon for patients to have a little bit of withdrawals, a little bit of kind of, even though you're not in ketosis, maybe that keto flu type feeling where you just feel achy or tired or extremely hungry. And as I tell my patients, if you get to 14 hours and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to eat the leg off the chair, then eat. It's fine. And go for a little longer the next time. Work your way up. Even if it takes you 2 weeks, fine. I think most patients can get there faster, but it's okay. It's no big deal as long as we get there. But our body is always wanting to repair and rest and regenerate. And when we're not actually eating, it's allowing our organ systems to actually not work as hard, which allows our body to regenerate, rejuvenate, detoxify. It allows it over time, it forces our body to use fat for fuel. So we start to actually burn that fat that's been sitting there. Because as we talk about, it's really hard to burn fat when we haven't been burning fat, because our body wants to save it and store it. And so it's a way to force the body into using that fatty acid oxidation, which is the process of using fat for fuel. And then as it gets more proficient in that, you'll start to use more fat for fuel, which is what we actually want. So ultimately, after a few weeks, and I feel like this is true for nearly anyone that fasts long term, they will tell you they have more energy, they think more clearly, they get sick less, they work out better. Some of the myths of fasting are that if I work out in a fast, I can't do it. That's BS as well. The only real time I tell my patients that they shouldn't fast and maybe exercise is if they're truly trying to gain muscle. So like maybe if you're training for a physical fitness competition or bodybuilding competition, then you might need to add protein around your workouts to really add muscle. That's not what most of my patients are going for. They're really going for the fat burning is really what they're going for. And you'll still build muscle fasting. It just won't be as much as you will, with adding protein to your workouts. So it's free. Obviously, it actually saves you some money, because if you're not eating in the morning, then that costs less than if you're eating breakfast. So the next thing that usually gets told to me is like, well, I kind of already do that. And I always say, well, there is no kind of. You either do or you don't. Kind of doesn't work in this scenario. As I joke with my patients, if you eat a peppermint in the morning, you've broken your fast. And so that does not count. But a lot of patients can adapt to it really quickly, because what I try to explain to my patients, there is a difference in starvation and fasting. So many patients, and especially my female patients, kind of subscribe more to the starvation model than the fasting model, which simply means they're trying to limit their calories as hardcore as they can. They're going extended periods of time without eating, but then they are eating. They're eating a few bites of this or a few bites of that because they finally get so hungry. And they're kind of like, maybe they only end up eating 600-700 calories at the end of the day, but they kind of did it sporadically through the day. And I'm like, that's not fasting. You would be so much better off if you would actually eat more, but in a controlled feeding environment. Because when you just starve yourself, your metabolic rate falls through the floor and you actually don't lose fat that way. You may lose weight, you may lose water, and you may lose muscle. Both of those things, well, water, maybe we do need to lose, but we don't need to lose muscle. Again, that's our currency of aging is muscle. So like I always just try to point out, there's a big difference in starvation and fasting.
So the thing that comes to my mind and what I didn't quite grasp is like, all right, so if I used to think it would be calories. So like in that example where you just nibbled through the day and I reduced calories, but I think the dots that really connected for me is when I understood the relationship with ketosis or ketones and insulin. So when we're eating something, if you imagine a fire department, you just eat something, the fire department in your body comes out and it's hosing down the insulin. We had to produce insulin to handle the sugar, and we need to put it out. And then when we finally get our hoses put up, and then the cleaning crew can come out and clean up. But if you keep sending out the fire department, so to speak, your body never gets to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, and insulin is the main reason why most patients can't lose weight or don't lose weight, is because they're eating higher glycemic foods, because that's what the American diet is. It's 50% carbs on average. Back to that food pyramid that I love so much, and that's sarcasm, of course, because most of us, again, and I'm sure we'll get into it eventually. Most of us should be eating lower carb than what we do. But when you eat something that has sugar in it, then there is a sugar release, and then there is a reactionary insulin release, which breaks down our sugars. And that insulin is very antagonistic towards our metabolism. And so sometimes, even in kind of taking the path on down the road, is why some of these advanced labs are good, because sometimes you will have patients that do a lot of these things and they still don't lose fat. And those are the patients that nearly always come back insulin resistant. In other words, they have high insulin levels. Maybe their A1C, which is their 90-day blood sugar test, is still normal, but they have much higher than normal insulin because their fat cells are becoming resistant to insulin. And now, so I always kind of use the analogy of like a water pump. And the water pump starts speeding up to try to keep the water from filling up behind it, and it keeps up with it for a while. And maybe the pool of water behind the water pump looks like everything's okay. And you can think of that as your A1C. Your blood sugar average is fine, but the water pump is going way too high RPMs. And then eventually you'll get water pump failure. And then boom, now your water fills up and you flood. And that's basically how I like to explain what happens with insulin resistance and then into diabetes for patients. So when they're walking around on a daily basis with too high of insulin levels, it's going to be harder for them to lose weight. That's when we have to get a little bit more creative in how we treat those patients. That's why advanced labs sometimes can be extremely helpful. So patients that just try intermittent fasting, and I will talk to probably a patient a week that says, I did intermittent fasting. I really did, doc. I heard what you said. I did it for a few months. It really did nothing for me. And I go, and I bet you're insulin resistant. And nearly every single time we draw labs, they are. And so then we just have to get more creative. But it all goes back to insulin. So when we're not eating and we're having extended periods of time of not eating and we're not insulin resistant, okay, we're normal there. Well, no sugar equals basically no insulin. It allows our metabolism to ramp up. It allows us to burn fat for fuel. And we feel better when we do that. We do better when we do that. And we look better when we do that.
The thing that helped me too is we say sugar, but your body, what does it see as sugar? Potatoes, rice, bread, corn, and sugar. And it's all the same thing to your body, right?
Mhm. Yeah, as I always, and I think that's a good point to take over to. I always tell them, if you'll intermittent fast, okay, it's free, doesn't cost anything. I can explain it to you in 10 minutes and you'll probably understand it and you can start doing it tomorrow. That's A. B, diet. Without giving you the hour-long consultation, what are some things that you can do? The 5 most common foods that the American loves to eat, and especially the American male loves to eat: bread, rice, pasta, corn, and potatoes. I always have a little saying: if it's white and you eat it and it's not cauliflower, it's most likely not good for you. Um, and I try to tell my guys, and my ladies, but especially my guys, because they'll freak out if you tell them that they never again can have bread, rice, pasta, corn, and potatoes. They're like, Jesus, you just got rid of my whole diet. And I say, let's try to limit those things. Let's try to think of things that we can have in replacement of those things, that we won't feel like we're being punished, and we can pull it off, and we can still dabble in those 5 foods occasionally, but they shouldn't be with every meal. Because think about it, the American, male or female, pretty much has one of those 5 foods in every single meal that they eat. It's a breakfast burrito for breakfast, or a donut. It's a hamburger with fries at lunch, and then they go home and God knows what they eat there. Chicken fried steak or something. I mean, it's just sugar, 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 carbs, carbs, carbs. And if we can just, and I'm not a huge advocate of ketosis, or actually I am an advocate of ketosis, but ketogenic diet is what I meant to say. I think ketogenic diet can be okay for short periods of time, but I don't think it's realistic to pull off long term. And it does have increased incidence of gallstones and kidney stones, and it does lower your immune system eventually. But we love ketosis. From our prior conversations, we like brief bouts of ketosis. But if someone's like, hey, I'm going to go no carb, because what is ketogenic diet? It's no carb. It's not low carb. It's no carb. You're basically taking in extremely small servings of carbs per meal. I think that's fine. If somebody says, I want to do it for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even a month, I want to jumpstart my weight loss, that's great. I have no issue with that. But then let's have plan B. Where are we going in a month? Because so many people that do ketogenic, no one has thought about day 31. They get to day 31 and they just revert back to day 0, which is right back to what they were doing. And then if you really want to gain your weight fast, do ketogenic for a month, go back to what you were doing prior, and you'll watch yourself have regained all of that weight you lost in 2 weeks. I mean, because your body just goes whoop. It's like a dehydrated something that you put water on. It just goes whoop, like a sponge, a dehydrated sponge. So just a matter of having these conversations with your provider that knows how to do these things, because, I believe what diet is best is whatever diet works. Like I have I'm probably one of my hardest patients dietary wise, because I don't like a lot of things. If life were perfect, it would be a steak and a baked potato for every meal. I'm a very typical Texan. I like my bread. I like my all that stuff that's bad for me is what I like. I don't like tons of green vegetables and things like that. So I have to really work at it. I have to figure out what works for me. And that's what I tell patients. If you won't eat certain things, then we don't need to waste our time talking about it. Like if you put a plate of broccoli in front of me, I'm probably going to die. I mean, I just don't like broccoli. And so it's really just figuring out what works. And I love rotating diets, and by the way, anytime I use the word diet, I do not mean the word diet in that I'm going to do something for this many days and then I'm going to go back to what I was doing. I say diet, I mean lifestyle changes. And I think you can do Mediterranean for a while, and then you can maybe do ketogenic for a while, and maybe low carb. I'm a low carb guy. I just like that's what works well for me, is just trying to say, I tell all my patients, I don't have a perfect diet. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I do. I don't. You may catch me out on Saturday night having a piece of cheesecake. I think life is too short not to eat some of these things. But I try to do really good Monday through Friday, and I try to keep my carbs low. I try to eat healthier foods. I try to eat clean meats. You try to do hormone free if we can. We try to cook them the right way. We try not to eat deep fried things, and just, use lots of olive oil and get those good fats. And it doesn't have to be hard. And so when you're intermittent fasting, it's a cheat code. It really, I mean, I know some people hate that term cheat code, but it is. It's a cheat code that allows us to have maybe a moderately healthy diet and then get the results that we need, because so many patients, they work so hard and they do so good and they do good for 6 days, and then they have that bad day, and then maybe the next day is not so good, and they wake up 8 days later and they've had no progress because they lost it all. Intermittent fasting can really help with that. It's just one more tool in the toolbox to help a patient, but I think it's a crucial one. I really do.
Think I heard Dr. Seed say one time, if he could just get you to do intermittent fasting, you could eat whatever you want. He wouldn't care. It's like that's such a big lever on improving your health. I think the other small thing that helped me is when you sit down and you're at a restaurant, they bring you your plate. If you look at it from how your body looks at food, generally it's like 60 to 70% sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the potatoes and the bread and the pasta or whatever, and then a little bit of protein. If you just flip that, if you had it where it was just 60, 70% protein and then 30% of the sugar, whatever that would be, you would make a big change.
I'll even add to that. So what we want is our patients to start understanding nutrition. We want them to be able, and I am not into counting peas and slices of carrots and things like that. We won't do that long term. But if we can learn this food is good, this food is not so good, this one is bad. Sure, we all know cupcakes are probably not good for us. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. I always say cakes, candies, pies, sweet drinks, we know those are bad for us. If I have to explain that to you, we've got bigger issues. But then some people legitimately don't know that a potato has the glycemic index of 1, which sugar has a glycemic index of 1. So as I explained to them, when you're having that baked potato, we are basically taking sugar packets and just pouring it into our mouths. So, hey, let's look for a better option. Hey, maybe let's get the side salad, and hey, let's pick a dressing that you can actually see light through instead of things that you can't see light through. Let's, as crazy as it sounds, those things, these small, I truly believe that with ultimate, and I'm not even going to use the word weight loss, I'm going to use body composition changes. For body composition changes, it's the smallest things that make the biggest impact, but they don't do it quickly. You have to look at it. Okay, where am I going to be in a year, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years? Because God hope we're still around then. And we need to make these little changes that make big changes down the road. So many patients, they just give up. They're just like, give me the quart of ranch dressing. And I love ranch just as much as anybody. I'm just saying, we can make better choices. Sometimes just maybe, I'm like, okay, hamburger and fries. All right, we're going to go to Whataburger. Whataburger is the only restaurant open. And I am starving to death. I have to go to Whataburger. You can do things like get maybe a double meat hamburger, but say wrap it in lettuce. And now you're not getting that. I would rather you get like the double meat and have the fullness that you're looking for, but not need the French fries to go along with it. And of course, let's not get the soda. Let's maybe get a water or an unsweet tea or black coffee. I'm not claiming that's the healthiest meal I've ever had or that you've ever had, but it's a hell of a lot better than the number one combo meal that most people are going to choose. They're going to get the burger with the big ass bun on it. They're going to get the large order of fries because they upgraded it, and they're going to get probably a drink with sugar, or even just as bad, the Diet Coke. Please don't drink diet drinks either. And we could have made that at least reasonably healthy. Just get they'll do it. Say, hey, wrapped, double meat hamburger wrapped in lettuce and an unsweet tea, and you'll you'll come away from it just as satisfied. Your cholesterol panel may not like you, but your brain will like it because it needs cholesterol. But anyway, it's just small things like that, because we're all put in situations where we're with the kids or we're just short on time and the fast food restaurant is all we've got. Luckily in Texas, and I don't know how many people listening are in Texas, but we've always got a barbecue joint somewhere. And those can be good choices for us, believe it or not. They've always got a smoked chicken or a smoked turkey. And, you can, heck, I would rather you just eat that, just eat the meat, and, you will be full and satisfied from it. So that's what we really like to do, is just teach them how to understand what's bad for us. And then going back to what you said, like more protein, most patients don't even understand that the order in what you eat your food makes a difference. And if you can be regimented enough to eat your food, like they used to make fun of people that would eat all their meat first or whatever, their plate had to be completely separate. But as Dr. Seeds always talks about, let's say we're going to have a sugary carb, let's say we're going to have bread, rice, pasta, corn, and potatoes. If we could start with our vegetables, preferably green vegetables. Yes, I know I'm not the greatest at this, if my wife is listening, but your green vegetables, and then eat your protein source, and then maybe wait 3 to 5 minutes and then have your carb. A couple reasons it works. If you take that 3 to 5 minute break, you may find or the dessert, okay, 3 to 5 minute break, you may talk yourself out of eating it. Okay. You may find that, because we eat so fast, we don't give our brain and our stomach time to tell us we're full, because we can blaze, it's like Thanksgiving Day. We can blaze right through fullness if we eat fast enough. So you may find yourself not hungry in 5 minutes, but B, you also give your body time to start digesting those good vegetables and that protein. And then when you add that sugary starch on top of it, the analogy I use with my patients is this: if I eat a baked potato on an empty stomach, and if you've ever had a gravel driveway poured, it's the dump truck effect. So if you eat a baked potato, the dump truck backs up, it puts the bed to 90 degrees and it dumps all the gravel out. That's your sugar. 100% of that sugar, boom, it's into your bloodstream. Now you get an intense sugar insulin spike because of the intense sugar spike, or maybe a donut. Okay. But if we take that same baked potato and stuff it full of, maybe we ate a little bit of smoked chicken before we ate the baked potato, and we gave our body time to start digesting that, we now dampen that dumping of sugar out. So now the dump truck bed is 45 degrees and it's slowly letting the gravel out, slowly, the sugar, causing less of an insulin spike, causing less of a negative impact on our metabolism. And so hence why, if we can kind of do these sometimes in order, we can actually get good results. How much is that going to matter on a day? The first time you do it? Not much. But if you follow these things long term, they make big differences down the road. And most of this stuff doesn't have to be painful. And it's just lack of knowledge for most patients. They just don't understand it. And that's why it's our job to try to educate them.
So we've talked about ketone esters in our previous conversations a bunch, but I wasn't clear on why it was important. But our brain prefers to run on fuel that is based on ketones rather than starch or sugar. And that's when it started to connect. Oh, I eat different. My brain feels better. Then I've made a big change because I worry, people worry, well, if I fast, I'm just going to not have any energy. That's not true.
And if you do have that problem, and especially early on, that's where your ketone esters can come in, because ketone esters don't break a fast. Ketone esters are the most, we like to say it's racing fuel for the brain and the body. So it's the most energy packed source that your body can use. And it decreases hunger. So if you're fasting, you're like, oh my God, I can't make it 2 more hours. You can do 5 to 10 cc's of ketone esters, which is ketoneaid.com. You can actually then suppress your appetite. increase energy, increase brain function, indirectly, not directly, indirectly helping with fatty acid metabolism. And so it's and I'm glad you brought it up because I was about to, because it's actually goes right along with fasting, in my opinion. It's another great thing that's over the counter. Patients certainly can come in to get it from us, or they can go to ketoneaid.com and buy it themselves. If they put in our research, they get a little increased shipping for free. And it's a great product. It really, really is. The only negative is it tastes really bad. But other than that, it works really, really well. And so, and actually just totally different subject. They now have Frank at Ketoneaid now has a different kind of alcohol drink. It's a hard seltzer, which is kind of amazing because it's a totally different alcohol than what we normally drink. So you get a little bit of that feeling, but you actually get the ketone esters and you feel good when you do it without hangovers and things like that. So that's just something totally to the side. But yeah, ketone esters are amazing. They're an amazing. And then, if you want one more tip for those out there, throw a little sodium bicarb in your diet, baking soda, or as we like to use, Alka-Seltzer Gold. Throw a couple of absorbing, I don't even know what you call those things, tablets of Alka-Seltzer Gold, but it has to be the gold, not Alka-Seltzer. Alka-Seltzer Gold, you can only get it on Amazon. Very inexpensive. It's just baking soda is all it is, but helping that intracellular pH stay more basic, which makes everything function better, as we talked about with ketone esters and baking soda. And intermittent fasting. Those are just better. Those are great ways to make our cellular function improve, cellular communication improve, and decrease cellular senescence at the same time, which is what we don't want.
Those are extremely long-term impacts on the quality of your health.
Right. And I completely agree with Bill, Dr. Seeds on this. If you will allow me to correct your hormones, if you will intermittent fast, if you will have a reasonable diet, I'm going to put on their reasonable diet. Okay. I know what he said, and I agree with him to a point, but if you'll give me a reasonable diet, not a tight diet, a reasonable diet, and you will give me some exercise and let me guide you on exercise, because we need to be resistance training. We need to get some cardio into, but we need to resistance train. So many of my patients will have great success. And maybe we mix in some ketone esters occasionally. Maybe we take some supplements, some vitamin D, maybe some DIM, some other things. We will guide you on that, and mix in some Alka-Seltzer Gold. And that is a recipe for success for, I would easily say, 95% of my patients. It doesn't have to be complicated. Now we can take it up from there. And that's where I get patients that take that and run with it. And they're like, what's next, doc? What's next? And that's where peptides come in. Or if they are insulin resistant, intermittent fasting does help with insulin resistance, but many times we have to use some specific peptides for insulin resistance. That's where we have to get a little more creative in our treatments, but we can handle it. It's not a big deal as long as the patients are patient and see this as a long game, not a short game, that, hey, this is going to take a little while, but we'll get you there.
Think of these changes. These are the kind of folks that you work with. It's the kind of physician or provider that you want to work with. We're going to make some lifestyle changes that are going to make a big impact. There's a Dr. Goldhammer. He talks about how the secrets, he calls it water fasting, but how simply approaching it this way can make a giant improvement in your health, and as a provider, in the health of your practice.
Mm-hmm. And when you get into fasting, then we can start talking about advanced fasting. There's a lot of benefits to, I personally believe that we adapt to everything. Our body will adapt to everything. So in other words, when I've said it, you've heard me say it, like if we jump on the treadmill and we run at 4.5 miles an hour, and that's what we do every day for 30 minutes, that'll work for a while, but then eventually the results won't be the same. And I think fasting's the same. I think that we need to change it up. Some days, hey, if you get to 16 hours and you're like, hey, I'm not hungry, fine, keep going, maybe mix in OMAD once a week, which is OMAD, 1 meal a day. I think there's some really big advantages to that, going 23 hours. Hey, I really like fasting. Let's go overnight. I used to think I would die if I went overnight fasting. And, now we can successfully pull off 40-hour fasts with some ketone esters and water. And it's not as bad as you think. And you feel great afterwards. And then whenever you see, like, it's kind of amazing with like a 40-hour fast, you'll actually see your weight usually go up a little bit because your body's kind of holding on to fluids and things. But then like that release, you get like 48, 72 hours afterwards, and you lose 2 pounds of fat, and you're like, wow, how did the hell did that happen? And you feel great. Some people even think fasting can be very spiritual for them. I do recommend Dave Asprey's book, Fast This Way. I think it's a very interesting book. It kind of opened my eyes to some of the different things with fasting. It's got a lot of shameless plugs for his products I don't think you need, but, overall, I think the material is really, really good. Fasting can be an amazing thing. And sometimes just fasting can be the trick. A lot of times we just got to play with these different things and educate our patients. But what I think makes us different, doctors who do what I do, is having the patient walk out of the room understanding why they need to do it. And I have a motto I tell all of my patients when I first see them. If you ever leave my office with a question, it better be because you didn't ask. It better not be because I didn't explain it correctly, because I expect my patients to say, hey, I didn't understand that explanation. Okay, let me explain it a different way. Because I want them, because if you understand why you're doing something, you're more likely to do it, versus if I just said, Steve, you need to not eat for 16 hours a day, water, black coffee, unsweet tea. And I walk out of the room, you're going to go, what, why the hell would I do that? That sounds horrible, and you won't do it. But once you explain all the benefits, you're like, oh, okay. So anyway, and it's really easy to do.
I think the other big impact this has on you is that person inside of your head that was telling you, you can't fast, you can't do this. And then on the other side, you're like, wow, I see myself totally different. I see myself more in control. I see myself less as a victim of food that was served in front of me, and I just have to suffer through a chicken fried steak with extra gravy.
Yeah, and it does. It gives you that ability to start saying no to things, like, oh, okay, if I can go 16 hours without eating, surely I can not eat this chicken fried steak. Mm-hmm. But then also backing it up with the education, with nutrition, so that they feel comfortable. Because so many patients, they're raised in households where that's the food that mom cooked and mom served, and they just don't know any better. They actually get a little nervous and anxious whenever you actually try to, help them, order different foods. They just don't understand. And then once you help them understand, like frying foods, like let's take that one just real quick. Like I tell my patients, I don't want you deep frying anything if we can help it. But I don't mind at all if you sear pork chops in olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil. Olive oil is great for us. And if you just put in a skillet without the flour on the pork chop, but that's how you want to cook it, is, in a skillet with some olive oil, awesome, go for it. I think that's great. That's fine. But then they're like, oh, well, yeah, I'll do that. That's cool. I didn't realize you meant that. And, trying to get them to get the canola and the vegetable oil out of the pantry. But those are just examples of little things that patients just don't know, how they can make these changes.
Yeah. Even if you go to your mom's house and she's going to make chicken fried steak, you can have it because you've been fasting. And yeah. It's not. That's what I love about this conversation or about working with you, is that there's not it's never anymore. It's that I have the luxury of being able to veer on that side of the line every once in a while because I'm spending way more time over here on the healthy side.
Yeah, if you spend like 90-10, 90% on the good side, 10% on the bad side, you're going to be fine. The problem is most Americans spend 90-10 on the bad side, 10% on the good side. And we're just trying to get them more to that positive side, any change is going to make differences. It really will. It's just, and you're going to have those motivated patients that they buy in from day one and they literally change their life and 100% in. I'm not that kind of guy. Actually, I take that back. I was, because when I first got into this, because I saw the path I was on and I was fearful. I knew what I was doing wasn't working, and I really did go over 100%. I wouldn't be that way today because I just know that I don't have to do that. And I try not to be that dramatic with my patients. Although sometimes I see things on labs and I'm like, look, we got like a year to get this fixed or you're going to be a diabetic. That's the most common thing I see is diabetes. And diabetes, if you want to wreck your life, become a diabetic. It's just a recipe for disaster. As I tell my patients, there was a study many years ago that looked at men who had had their first heart attack, but no diabetes. Okay. And then they had a second group, diabetic males who had never had a heart attack. And then they followed them for 5 years to see who was more likely to have a heart attack and or die from a heart attack. And guess what they found? And you probably already know where I'm going with this. The diabetics who had never had a heart attack were more likely to have a heart attack in 5 years and were more likely to die from that heart attack than were the guys who had already had a heart attack but no diabetes. Diabetes is probably the biggest risk factor we can have for dying from cardiovascular events. And that's just one of the things it does to us. I always say you don't die from diabetes. You just die from all the malfunction that it causes within the body.
So being a provider with a practice of folks that are on board about changing their lifestyle, how does that feel?
Oh, well, it feels great. I mean, it goes back to what I always say. It's again, not trying to say anything negative about the men and women who are on the front lines doing traditional primary care. They certainly provide a service and we need them to do those things. But I just didn't feel like I was making the differences in my patients' lives that I really felt like I could or wanted to make. And now I feel like I am making those differences. Like last night, for example, I went to a spin class locally that my patients go to. They've been really on me to come to that spin class. They're like, Doc, you would love it. You got all of us into this and we've joined this spin class on Monday nights at 6:30 and we want you to come. And they've been on me for like a month. And I went last night and it was really cool to see a few of them like really getting after it and working hard and being fit and living that lifestyle, and all my age around 50, saying, hey, we know we have to do these things. And heck, I needed to do it too. I enjoyed it. And so those are things that I just never would have had back in my traditional practice. I just don't think I was probably going to happen where people are inviting me to exercise classes. So anyway, that's kind of that's what I think about it.
Think about that, what you just said. How many of you listening have ever had a physician that would come and go to an exercise class with you? That's a paradigm change right there.
Well, they finally worked me through it. They're like, hey, if we're doing it, you got to do it. So I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. And so anyway, I had to admit, I was a little fearful because I was like, what if they're kick my butt in this class? Like, how shameful will this be? Luckily, I held my own. I don't think I embarrassed myself. I think that I came through it okay. And I don't think anybody was making fun of me behind my back. Like, damn, he's in bad shape. So, but it's fun. It's really cool to see your patients embracing these types of things. And because exercise is absolutely a key to aging gracefully. It absolutely is. It's everything works together, but exercise is crucial.
If you're a provider or a physician and that story right there, if that's an aspirational image in your mind, you need to connect with Dr. Kris. How should they do that, Dr. Kris?
Easiest way is probably just start by emailing me, and it's just DRKRIS, Dr. Kris with a K at theresearchclinic.com. And again, I communicate with a lot of different providers from different entities. I'm more than happy to have a conversation, see how maybe we can help or direct them in a direction, get them in a direction that they can start their education or however we can help.
And then as far as information that you would recommend your audience to check out, that would be in line or help kind of seal the deal, make the sale in their mind, listening to other folks, where would you send them?
Well, if it's a patient, a potential patient, I'd recommend them going to our website. So, it's just theresearchclinic.com. We have a lot of great information on that website, as you know. And then providers, again, I really still recommend checking out SSRP or A4M or even AMMG. Of course, I have to selflessly promote. I'm more partial to SSRP. I'm a faculty member there, but I very much believe in what Dr. Seeds is teaching. And so I think that's a great place for potential providers in this area of medicine to start their education.
And then you speak often when invited. So the same thing applies. If you can envision Dr. Kris speaking to your group, to your organization, at a conference, be sure to reach out as well.
Absolutely. We'd love to.
All right. That's a wrap. Great conversation, Dr. Kris.
Thanks, Steve. I always appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.drkris.life, where you can find more great information or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris podcast.